All right, we're recording. Hey, sister.
Hey, I'm in bed.
You're reporting live from bed. Okay, great. We are virtual here. I'm reporting from my home office, which is really like half of my living room. So let's be real. So we're gonna get started and hop right in today. I mean, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm great.
You look like you've been working out.
Can you see my chaps? I asked Justine if I look too much like CrossFit and if I needed to put a blouse over this. I'm into the more feminine, delicate look, but I realize as I'm getting older, I don't have the most feminine, delicate body anymore. So I need to embrace like a strong,
I think
CrossFit
it's a
persona. Even though I don't CrossFit, it's from the garden. All of this.
I think the only thing not feminine about my body is this 5 o'clock shadow I'm getting.
Ooh, good one.
Quarantine. I'm just kidding.
I can't see it. Don't you have a little
Yeah, I
thing?
do. I'm joking
A
because
micro
I keep having, I mean, it really is like a shaver for women. They have these cute little names, right? But
You can't say I shave though. Yeah, gonna get up and do you remember that thing that Dad used to have that he would put that little soap in and have the little brush and it would go like and soap up?
it's
I
called,
always wanted to do
isn't it
that.
called shaving cream?
But it was like a special bowl and he like dipped it in there
Oh,
and
I know.
I like I always wanted to do that to myself, but obviously no, I imagine somebody somewhere does that.
I'm sure. I keep wanting to make jokes like on my Zoom calls because the men, they keep showing up with like longer and longer beards, from no barbers being open, even though they could trim them themselves.
Yeah.
Whole other topic. But I feel like they keep showing up with these longer and longer beards or scruff, and they'll be like, I didn't shave. And I really want to say, yeah, me either. But I don't know how they'll take it. And I don't know if that makes men uncomfortable. Like, well, can I joke with her about
Sure it does. They don't want to think about us having facial hair. I mean, they just don't.
everybody has
But
hair on their bodies
I
unless
know.
you have, is it called alopecia?
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you actually don't because of some type of,
Disease.
condition.
Yeah. I
Everybody
would like alopecia of the body. I would like alopecia of the body, but luxurious locks for the rest of my life. Can I get that accomplished somehow?
I don't want to go down this path. We've had these conversations before where you ask if I had to get plastic surgery, would I do it on my face or my body or all that? No, we're not going down that road again. Um, but let's go ahead and dive in. So thanks for tuning into this, whether you're watching, because we are recording this as a video, but also whether you're listening to our podcast episode. Today, we wanted to kind of just talk about how do you, right? There's this huge kind of umbrella concept of intuition. And we have, we'll share with you guys the link, but we have an ebook that we're releasing on intuition. But I want to talk more about how do you know the difference between God's voice or hearing from the divine or your voice? And I don't know that that's something we discuss enough, whether you attend religious services somewhere or belong to a church or you do your own home studies, whatever spiritual practices you have. I think that it can be confusing sometimes, especially the times that we're in right now, because you are asking yourself a lot of questions about maybe you want to pivot your business, or maybe you want to look for a different job. Maybe you're reevaluating if You should be staying home all the time, because, excuse me, your kids are now in your face all the time and you're realizing things. I don't know. I just wonder how many other people struggle with that, because I think that it takes time to develop that kind of, I guess, muscle. So
Yeah.
what would be your thoughts on that?
Dang, you always like throw me these really broad.
Well, because I like to hear what you think about it in general, and then we can kind of go wherever we go, because I just know that it's something I've struggled with. I have struggled with differentiating between God's voice and, oh, is that just Justine's voice telling me what I think I should?
What I think I've learned, and I'm almost 40, but what I think I've learned is that you don't necessarily, it depends on how close-knit you are with God. And if you don't believe in God, like, or you're just not sure about if there's something more out there bigger than you, you're just not sure what that's called. I'm speaking about the same thing that you believe in.
Right.
So, we don't attend church anymore. We made a decision as a family a few years ago that my husband and I were both sort of feeling like when we went to church, our kids were not getting what worthwhile messaging there. And we wanted to make sure that we were the ones that were teaching them kind of our interpretation of how we have come to know God, not just like this quote unquote Sunday school experience where you go in, color some pictures, sing a couple of songs, and then play games with your church buddies. That wasn't something that we felt was beneficial. We are very busy as a family, and Sundays it was like we felt more productive on the days that we stayed home and did our own family study. We're together that whole day rather than having the panic of the Sunday morning and the rush, and then all of a sudden it's late afternoon and like, where did the weekend go? That just wasn't what we chose for our family. Anyway, so through that process, I feel like my husband and I both have drawn closer to God individually, because it's not like we don't feel this pressure to have to attend a service every Sunday as just something we have to get checked off the list. Our relationship has grown to be more of a daily, minute by minute, like conversation with God. It's not so much about setting aside a certain time period or time frame to interact with God as part of the schedule. It's more about having a lifestyle that is constantly intertwined with the voice of God and being with God and knowing that there's an omnipresence there all the time. And so when you come to find that for yourself, I feel like your ability to know that you're hearing the voice of God is 100% there, because you have that deep personal relationship and conversation with God all the time. You know how you react with him. You know how he reacts with you. You know how he speaks to you or through you. You know how he works through you. You know how you understand better why you were put here on this earth when you have a relationship like that. And so I think in my experience, we grew up in the Christian tradition. I don't necessarily call myself a Christian at this point in my life. I mean, that is the closest teaching to how I understand God, but I also know that there's some negativity associated with that as well. But in our tradition growing up, it was kind of a disciplinary relationship with God in a way. There wasn't like,
let me also say though, that can be okay, and there were a lot of good things about that, at least for me.
okay.
No, I'm saying for some people, it's good to have that structure and that is what helps your personality. I don't think that you have a personality that thrives with somebody saying,
Right.
hey, let's go through this devotional day by day, and every morning we're going to spend 30 minutes.
Right. Because you have to, because of,
Yeah,
I
full
mean, there
disclosure.
was never logic
Before I started,
necessarily.
full disclosure. Before I started recording, Kara had to keep me focused on one thing. So when you know, like I need that in a lot of ways. Like people think I'm super organized. It's because I've worked really hard at it, and I still have to work really hard at it, or I don't get anything accomplished.
Right. I'm a very easily distracted person in many ways, but I also feel instantly restricted if I'm told I have to do something a certain way, or if I'm told. I don't have a problem complying. It's more when I don't see a rationale behind something, or kind of like the good effects that something is supposed to have. Like I need to have a full understanding of something before I fully throw myself or buy into it. So anyways, that was not particularly helpful in my relationship with God. And as I broke away from that for myself, and it's good that you say, like, some people do need that discipline, some people need that, structure to that, but depends on the type of person you are and the kind of relationship that you have or you want to have. And when you start hearing, like, feeling certain nudges in certain ways in your life, you are again more prone to understand that nudging or feeling that you're having, that gut instinct that might be completely opposite of what's rational and up here, is not the same as what's here for me oftentimes. But being able to have the courage to say, I'm going to go with that because I know right now I'm with God and he's with me, and for whatever reason I need to do this way. It doesn't need to make sense to me, but that's part of, like, that is faith, when you get to the point where that doesn't make sense, but that's what I'm supposed to do, and I know that I'm supposed to do that.
Which, by the way, I have a belief that you, like, unless you have doubt or fear, or you haven't questioned things at some point, then faith, you wouldn't have a need for faith. Faith is there
Right.
because it is making that leap and saying, this doesn't make logical sense, this doesn't add up, or this doesn't appear to be how things are, but something tells me, right? That still small voice, or that nudging, or however God tends to kind of communicate or send you signals. I think if we kind of go back a little bit to something else you said, which I think is important, is establishing that journey for yourself. And that was something that I had a harder time doing into my 20s, because it had become a very religious practice for me. And again, not all bad. There were some good habits, some good disciplines that come from that. And that is building a foundation of who you are. But it also builds that foundation, whether it's through your relationship with your spouse or your significant other, or a parent with their child, whatever. You, at the end of the day, you can't just attach yourself to somebody else's walk. So there's something to be said for being in that and actually establishing your own journey and your own walk with God. And that is what starts to build that closeness beyond a church group, beyond your family or how you were brought up. Because I know from working with kind of this cultural psychology side of things, when I ask people why they believe what they believe, no matter what it's about, it usually is, well, that's just always what I've believed, which really tells me they've never actually established their own belief system outside of how they were raised.
Right. Well, and the other thing I think you have to think about a lot, and this is very, very difficult for me sometimes, and you might say the same, but when you're talking about using your intuitive spirit that God has given you, I think you have to also start looking at the world in a place of non-judgment. And so you're not ever forming an opinion about something before you make a decision on your own. Like you're not coming in with a preconceived notion, or if you have a preconceived notion that starts in your head, you need to look at things in a sense of, I'm going to look at this with questions. I'm going to look at this of curiosity. I'm not going to put my preconceived judgments on the situation. Otherwise, your intuitive muscle is not going to be utilized, because you already know going into a situation what you're going to pick, or the decision that you're going to make, or how you are choosing to look at a situation. And so that kind of negates your ability then to use your intuition. And I noticed, like, as I started looking at the world more like that, I was able to make more sound decisions based on what actually I was supposed to be doing, because I wasn't coming in hot and heavy with my own agenda and my own thoughts on how I thought things were going to work out from A to Z before I'd even, started going through the process. So I think that's a really hefty point that, especially right now, I feel like we struggle with as humans. Like, it is very easy to look at something or talk to somebody and immediately pass judgment like that. Whether you write it down or say it or think it, like, when you are processing things that are being thrown at you, you're probably going to have a very first reaction of, oh, this is what I think. And it's your responsibility to kind of dissect that in your own mind before you kind of say that or write it, or and really find out why you think the way you think. And if you have a strong reaction or an intuition about something, where did that come from?
Right. Well, and everything begins with a thought. Our thoughts
Right.
are really, really powerful. And that's why I think we do talk so much about how do you make those shifts of whether it's a lack mindset to having a growth mindset or whatever, right? Limiting beliefs to having open-minded beliefs. It's so important because what we think essentially becomes what we believe. That ends up being our attitudes, that dictates our behaviors, our actions, and that essentially makes up our character and how we show up in the world, how we interact with other people. And I think one of the other things that comes to mind is, are we open to other avenues? Meaning, like, I've gotten asked the question, and you and I were talking about this earlier. Well, like, how do I know how to pray? Is there a right way to pray? Is there a right way to spend time with God? And I think we have to, like, I used to believe, like, okay, I should be doing a daily devotional every morning, or I should be reading my Bible before I go to bed every night, even if I fall asleep on top of it. But when we make that like a thing that is a task, we're showing up as just, again, doers instead of sitting in peaceful, like, stillness to also listen and just being with God, whether that's going to walk on the beach or just walking outside to your backyard or watching the sunrise. Those are moments, like, how often, and I think that's like the first step is, are you just taking time to listen? Because that's the thing. When I notice when it's hard for me to differentiate between, wait, is that because that's what Justine wants, or is that what God is leading me or guiding me to do? It's because I haven't been taking time to actually slow down, get rid of the noise, whether it's from social media or phone calls from friends or family members saying this. I haven't taken time to actually just sit in stillness. And
Right.
how can we hear God's leading, which really is the foundation of intuition, if we're not taking time to just be still?
Right. And I think for the time, a lot of people have struggled with being still. Like there's that expectation and that validation that comes from going, checking all the things off the to-do list, productivity, all, if you're in the business world, all of those things that kind of keep us from being still. And now we're like forced to be still. And a lot of people are having a hard time with it because that constant validation isn't coming in. It's just you and your creator and your family right now. Like that's pretty much what it's boiled down to for many, many people. And I think that, for the first couple of weeks of this, I was in a bad state of mind for a number of reasons. Had a lot of weird things happen all at the same time, including this quarantine stuff. But after a couple of weeks of feeling really heavy and just kind of like hopeless in a way, I made a conscious decision that I was going to be still and embrace this time. And if I wasn't enjoying something, I was going to figure out what would make this thing desirable or what would make the situation desirable. And I was going to 100% focus on that, even if it was one thing that made, doing two loads of dishes a day intolerable. I was going to find something joyful about that, and it's worked, and it's been only because of this time that I'm able to fully get into that in a place that I never have been before, as far as being able to sit still, think about, analyze, and find joy intentionally with everything.
Truly step back and take it one step at a time. And I would say too, like, this is where I would challenge people, and some people might not like me saying this, but I'm gonna put it out there because I think that, to your point, we have to step back, and then you have to ask yourself, well, why would you not want me saying that? Why does that make you uncomfortable that I'm saying that? And I would say you have to get on the balcony of your own life. So get up on the balcony and look down at your life, your thoughts, just your realm, and the space that you take up on this earth. And when you become more aware of yourself, it actually gives you the freedom to take action. But if you're a prisoner to your own mind and your thoughts and your judgments and your beliefs, and you haven't even sorted that out of who you are, then that's probably what's keeping you from wanting to take action or tapping into your intuition to know, yes, this is what I should do next. Yes, this is what feels right now, and feeling into that. And then also feeling okay with that yourself. The other piece of that is, if you say, well, I want to draw closer to God, or I want to better understand the character of God and the divine in my life, okay, well, again, go read books about it. Like take the first step of action. We don't just understand the nature and character of God from staring at the outside of a Bible or staring at the outside of a book on Esther or XYZ topic. If you want to understand how to be present, go read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, right? Like, there's all these steps that, while you are being still, hopefully it really, for me anyways, it's as simple as saying, God, what would you have me do today that would honor you and also honor the being that you've created me to be?
I think too, people have to remember that God takes you in whatever state you're in. And so you don't have to become a certain way to fall into his presence. You don't have to be a certain amount of quiet or still even to be in his presence. You can be angry, you can be sad, you can be all of those things and still come into his presence. And there's a verse in the Bible that says something about, even when you don't have words, this is paraphrased and I don't know where it's from exactly, but even when you don't have words to say, God the Holy Spirit of God knows your innermost thoughts and feelings, and will, I think it says something like, rumble into the universe all of those things that are inside of you that you can't express. And so I think when we get into this mindset of we have to be this certain prim, proper, this is how I was taught to pray on my knees beside my bed before, I go to sleep every night. This is how, I dress for Sunday morning to go to service. This is how I interact with people that are, I'm fellowshipping with at church. This is how I have to be when I'm around those people.
Right.
Don't, like, I think people have to stop thinking of themselves in the way that I'm accepted in this way in this crowd, I'm accepted in this way over here, and this is the way I accept myself. Like, all of those things have to come together, and that is a big part of intuition too, is growing all those things that many of us have different constructs of, and different, like, little compartments that we put.
Right.
We allow different people in our lives to see different parts of ourselves. And so I think part of your intuition is knowing how to meld those all together, and that's what you're going for. That's what God wants you to go for. He doesn't want you to become a cookie cutter version of what everybody else looks like they are, because I can guarantee you, if you have 10 people standing next to each other that are cookie cutter versions in every sense of that statement of each other, there are huge differences in personalities, spiritual gifts, um, talents in life, that all of those things. And people think in different ways. If you went inside each of those 10 people's head, each of them would be thinking something probably totally outrageous, in a sense that, their interpretation, they're going to make seem like the 10 other people that they're standing beside, but really in their head they're thinking something that they're too scared to say to anybody out loud because of the fear of, I don't know, not even, you think rejection, being made fun of, all of those things could still happen. But it's more being able to understand that you have your thoughts and feelings for a reason. Doesn't mean you need to spew all of them out there all of the time, but be who you are and be who God made you, because there's a reason, because somebody needs to hear it in the way that you have to say it.
Right. And the source of all that, right, is that we're created in God's image. So if we're created in God's image, and that's the ultimate source that we're looking to, of I'm created in God's image. And if we knew that in confidence, we would know we're worthy, we would know we're enough, and we would step into situations being willing to know it's not always about being right. It's not always about being the best at something or whatever. It's about, am I actually accepting of who God has made me to be? So when we show up in these spaces and we're putting on a show, so to speak, and not being our authentic selves, what we're really doing is rejecting who God made us to be.
Right.
And
we're not,
that stifles your intuition. So it's like, if God is the source, and you think about it like a faucet, if God is the water, every time that we suppress that, we're just like slowly slowing that stream until the faucet is totally turned off and the water's still in the pipes, and it's begging to be let free and to just flow, right, and be utilized in a powerful way. Because you think about it, when water comes through a faucet, you can use it in so many ways, and you can have it manifest in so many ways and impact so many lives. But if you shut that faucet off, then it's dried up. There's not guidance, there's not refreshment, there's not health, right? Like, it's all these things. But I think about it that way. Like, I think in pictures a lot of times, because we have the power at any moment to turn that faucet back on, because there's that direct connection to the source, which is God. And we often choose to keep it shut off because we're trying to put it into one box instead of just let it free flow. If you want to put the water in a kettle and make tea, if you want to go over here and clean with it, like, right, I'm being a little facetious, but like, that's the reality. And we choose every day that we choose not to either be in co-communication, meaning ongoing conversation with God, whether it's out loud, in our journals, in our heads, every decision or step that we make, we're choosing to rely only on self. And that's why then I think that that intuitive voice, which is God, gets blocked because we've shut it off.
The other part of this too is whatever your faith base is, even if you don't have a faith, if you're like, I don't think God is real, I don't see evidence, which I have a lot of conversation around that, but we won't go into that today. But whatever your belief is at your core, whether you have a lack of belief in anything or you have a full belief in a creator, I think it's super important in both worlds to keep your mind open and like listen to some things from unlikely people that you normally wouldn't be attracted to, people that you normally wouldn't listen to because maybe you consider yourself Christian and this person is a shaman or something, has some Buddhism or Hinduism or some element of something else that quote unquote isn't the right one or isn't the right thing because you've been told that that's contrary. But if you actually listen to some different insights and how God speaks to different people that believe differently than you will realize you have a lot more in common with everybody, and that those nuggets of wisdom are the same and universal. And it makes you, it exercises that non-judgment approach to things.
Well, and
it allows you
it does two things. It strengthens your own belief system, but it also further defines that as your own personal relationship with God and how that looks for you and how God speaks to you, therefore helping you enact your intuition better. Because the closer that you continue to chase after God, chasing after God's heart could look like a lot of things. And everybody's journey is different. So I think you can't discount when you see somebody maybe teaching about something a little different. Maybe they're interpreting the Bible differently than you would. It doesn't mean you have to agree. I don't think either of us is saying that. I don't think that you go around and just say, oh yeah, I agree with them. I agree with them. That's not it. And the world, we human nature, like, there's diversity of thought for a reason, because differences can be beautiful and they actually do help strengthen us and help us show up the way God wants us to show up. But one example that comes to mind, even from my own walk, is understanding a lot more nuances of Eastern religions, understanding a lot more practices. And a lot of this started actually when I started going to get regular massages. So something that was more of a self-care practice kind of led me down a road of like, oh, well, that's interesting with reflexology. And then I started studying the body and the chakras and the whole idea of how, different sources in your body are either inhibiting you from things or they're opening things up. And I know even me talking about that right now might make some of our listeners uncomfortable because they think, oh, that's weird, or, oh, that's this. But again, I would challenge people, just like Kara said, well, why does that make you uncomfortable? And you know what? If there's a legit intuitive reason and you've had a really bad experience, yeah. I mean, just like maybe you've had a really bad experience attending church, but it's also worth asking yourself, okay, was that isolated? Have I really examined this? Was that just one Reiki person I went to? Was that just one? But that also goes back to intuition. And a lot of times too, even when I'm studying something new, I'm asking God, like, show me what I'm supposed to learn from this.
Right. What's
Oh,
true about it?
yeah, open up my heart to be open to what you would have me to learn about the truth in this. And I think when you're asking that genuinely, and you're not just being dictated by, this is what I think, and this is the only way, then you can be open to gleaning new understandings and realizing new things about, I don't know, there's just so many different perspectives in our world. And I really feel like, the way that we see the world is how we ultimately end up leading in our own right? Like, whether no matter what industry you're in, or your family or whatever, how you see the world is ultimately how you're going to show up with other people. And so if you see the world in a very closed way, you don't see God as an available entity that can help you be intuitive, that can help you make decisions, then you're going to show up that way. And you're not going to have a lot of access to your intuition, and you're probably going to be pissed off and negative and looking at things from a very narrow mindset.
Right.
So what would you say to somebody listening that they're still struggling with this whole concept of, yeah, but how do I really pray? Maybe they grew up Catholic or Muslim or just in a very structured religion. And they're like, yeah, but how do I really have a conversation with God? And I just don't see us talking about that very much in our society. I think it's a lot more acceptable in some countries around the world, because there's a lot more emphasis put on the spiritual world. And so consequently, miracles, quote unquote miracles, tend to happen more often. And I don't use air quotes because I don't believe they happen. They do. But you see that because people are a lot more free with, whether it's speaking in tongues or having ceremonies that cast out spirits, or I don't know what you think about that, but like, I just think that we don't, especially in Western society, we sometimes discount the spiritual realm and how active it is.
I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter what I think about that, because somebody somewhere, that's their reality. And so it's not really for me to tell them that that's not their reality. That doesn't even make sense. When I'm thinking about, some of the judgment stuff that's associated with organized religion of many types, not just Christianity, it all goes back to the idea that we all have a different experience. We all speak different words throughout our lifetime. There's not one person that is my exact doppelganger from 1,000 years ago that has said the same words, lived the same life, had the same, we're all minute to minute different people and have a different experience. And we know this to be true. So it's easier for me at this point to accept that everybody has their own individual experience and that it doesn't matter what I think about it, than to try to like hone everybody in this funnel of what I think. The universe doesn't center around me. That's not the point. In a way, if you're making a judgment on what somebody else believes, you believe the universe centers around your belief, you and your belief. That's not, I don't think that's where anybody wants to be. But yet we end up propagating
Self-awareness. Yeah.
Yes.
We're back at square one with,
yep.
Are you actually aware of yourself, how you come off to people, how you're even thinking about the world? And so it sounds like, short form answer would be, there's no exact prescribed way that you need to pray.
Right.
There's not a prescription for, this is this is what you're supposed to do. And if you look at specifically in the Bible, how people cried out to God, how people connected with God, it was very different for everybody.
It was very primitive. I mean, if you think about the way that many of the things in the Old Testament went down, if you studied the Bible in any way, it was their approach to God was often out of desperation
Right.
in a really bad situation. They were wandering around in the desert with no food, no water, no nothing. They were pretty much screwed, and so their cries to God were from a place of desperation, and he responded powerfully to that. If you think about it, they didn't come with specific, like, ritualistic. No, they were desperate at that point, and that's when God responded. And so I think God wants us to come to him from a place of humility often, not that he wants us to be humiliated in our lives, but that we are who we are in the moment that we are in it, and just talk. Like, in my brain, when I have conversations with God, I am having conversation with God as a friend and a
Yeah.
and
Confidant.
actor, not
Confidant.
a
This is
confidant,
part
and
of
not and
everything.
yeah. So it's not like a real formal thing where I sit down, bow my head, close my eyes. You know, usually it's not that for me.
Yeah, and it depends too, right? Sometimes, a lot of times, why I even have like meditation practices as far as putting on a guided meditation or putting on some soft music and sitting, it is to force myself, because if I don't use those type of practices, I don't always stop and listen. And so I think it goes back to that self-awareness and knowing yourself, knowing what you need. And are you willing to always come with a humble spirit? Are you willing to come with a humble spirit that cries out to God and allows that glorification to happen, even when you're not in desperate need of something? Because I think it's very easy, human nature wise, it's very easy for us to cry out to God when we really are desperate and need something. But can we maintain that spirit and that humbleness, but also the recognition that I'm coming to you because I love myself and I accept exactly who you've made me to be. And sometimes we find ourselves tripped up, like, I don't know. I know when you've gone a while and maybe you haven't ever like prayed to God or a God, that can be really intimidating. And that's why I think then intuition becomes this kind of foreign concept of like, what do you mean intuition? Or you mean just listening to my own thoughts? Yeah, I do that. Like that becomes kind of blurry depending on how you were brought up, depending on your perception of prayer. And that can be a struggle because then we are in our heads, and I can see how it's very easy for people to just kind of sit there and go, okay, how do I do this? If you
It's like listening to your inner dialogue, but believing that there's a greater power listening in on that. You know what I mean?
and a greater power who's advocating for you day in, day out, 1,000%
right.
wants the best for you. And
Right.
also to realize that more times than not, if we don't have the best, it's because we've chosen that, or we've kept
Right.
ourselves from it, about a narrative or a lie that we've believed about ourselves.
Right. Right.
Well, wow, loaded topic. How do I know if it's God's voice or just my voice? Well, we hope you've enjoyed this.
Oh, one more thing though. We didn't really talk about the opposite, right? So, have you ever done something that you made a decision, you thought in your head that it was God's voice, but it didn't turn out so great?
Oh, that old chestnut. Let me think of a specific example. I don't, so I didn't think, here's the thing. When I look back on it, and even during that time period, I don't think that I actively sought out God's guidance for this situation, but I was wanting to get out of a living situation that I didn't like when I first moved to Chicago. And I also, my income had increased greatly because I went from being a teacher to being an administrator. And so, you know, Justine was just beside herself with 3 times the salary. And I mean, I chose someplace initially because it was also close to my first school I was at. And I always like to try to be at least within the same neighborhood of where I was serving. So that decision I made, I ended up, I don't think I even lived there a full year in that neighborhood, but the rent was just ridiculous as far as the expenses with utilities because there were so many windows. And yeah, okay, I got to experience living close to downtown, all that kind of stuff. But when I look back on it, I don't have regret, but I know that that was very much an ego-based decision. And anything that we do solely make from ourselves, yes, at a certain point, yes, you need to trust yourself to make decisions. But that was a situation where, no, it didn't turn out poorly, but I did start to, as a young adult, which that would have been almost 10 years ago, I really did start to differentiate between understanding. That sounds weird to say that I wasn't doing that until I was 27 years old. But that was my first taste of like, I didn't have to be restricted by a certain budget, so to speak. And if left to my own devices, what are really my beliefs around money, how it should be utilized, what's most important to me, what will make me happy? Like, because so much of my decision making had been either, okay, God said to go here, so I'm going to listen, and then God has opened up doors. That was one of the first situations vividly, and it's tied to finances, where I actually didn't have restrictions because I was making more money. And so I think it taught me a lot of valuable lessons. But when I look back, yeah, it was completely an ego-driven decision. And so it didn't turn out bad.
One of the things, though, that you said that's important, though, is when you are making a decision, there are multiple steps in most decisions that you make, and you will notice doors starting to close if you're really in touch with what God wants for you. Right. If you know, hindsight is 2020, that stupid old chestnut.
I don't think it's stupid.
I don't know. People say it too much. It's overused. But it's true. But you can look back and say, okay, this was probably not the best, but that door closed and another door opened. And at some point, you know, if you are like, none of this makes sense to me, these girls are living in a utopia of some sort, because I've never had anything like this. If you're thinking that to yourself right now, it's probably because you haven't really invested yourself in figuring out who God is in you. And those closed doors along the way, you know, you went ahead and opened them right back up again and walked on through.
Right.
So there's a lack of awareness at a certain point when you have a life that you hate, that you can't tolerate, that you despise. You don't necessarily want to die, but you're full of complaints. You're full of self-loathing. You're full of jealousy towards what other people have that you don't have, that you can't have, that you can't achieve, you can't get it because you're you and you just get the shit end of the stick 24/7. There's a mentality associated with it that you can break free from, but you have to recognize that if you're not willing to really examine what God wants for your life, then most likely you will continue to find yourself in a situation that is not desirable for you. Right.
Can you think of any specific examples?
Probably. I'm sure I can.
You're like, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Okay. So a recent example is you know,
Your house?
probably, well, yeah, my house, um, that, I don't know. I wouldn't say that's an example because we sort of went into that feeling like if it happens, great. If it doesn't, great. It
That's
whatever will be was meant to be. So
right.
I don't know about that. But I will say my former business, my boutique that I had, I will say that looking back, had I really been fully in tune with uh, God's desire in that for me,
Mhm.
I probably would not have entered that um, to
That
begin with.
particular path.
That particular path. Not that there was anything. I mean, I learned a lot from that. A lot of practical, creative stuff that I wasn't aware of even existed before. I have a lot of skills that I acquired through that.
I have a certain
It
I
wasn't.
have a certain particular set of skills. Okay, fine.
I wouldn't say any of that was bad, and that was some of the prosperity that God brought out of that for me. But I will say I was searching for something at that time, kind of out of restlessness. And
Mm,
had I been patient and waited in the way and operated in the way that I should have been, um, it wouldn't have been painful in the way that it was, you know? So I did go through a lot of pain from that experience, and that wasn't required or necessary. And that's kind of where if I would have taken a different path at that point of feeling restless, um, and been more patient and been more in tune, then that's the point that would have had a different outcome. But it I don't know. I mean, I feel like like right now, as I sit today, I'm exactly where I need to be.
right.
And I don't have that same feeling of restlessness that I had, and I have peace. So to me, that's what my intuition is saying.
And
And
and we wouldn't be in business together had you not
right,
put that aside. And I mean, like, that's the thing. I think that's part of the self-reflective process. So after you get aware about yourself, then reflect on things, because you can always learn. That's when I say fail, or like when I jokingly tell people I failed a lot, it's a good thing. I'm saying it because that means that you've tried some stuff. Because
right, you've tried
if you
everything.
don't have failures, you're not out there trying things. You're not building your resiliency. And this is more mainly for people who are seeking new jobs, or they want to launch a business, or maybe they have a business and they're questioning themselves, or maybe you're struggling with imposter syndrome because of a degree you're trying to get, whatever fill in the blank it is. And I think we all have those areas where, if we're really honest with ourselves, no, we don't feel 100% confident in everything every day, or everything we're going to try, and there's going to be some things that don't work out for us. But I think through those different things, and we talk very candidly about this because we still are a startup, and hopefully people find that encouraging, that yeah, you've seen us put out different things, you've kind of seen this journey, and we're still at the very start of it. But the way how we've agreed to operate, because we've operated in other ways, both of us have, whether it's been together or in our own companies, is we're going to try something, we're going to think about it, we're going to pray about it, and if we feel intuitively led to do it, then we'll go for it. And that doesn't mean that, I think you can't start equating it with like, okay, that means you're going to automatically get results. Because we can
Right,
believe that we have the best courses and books and all this stuff in the world, and we're still going to keep believing that. But
right.
that
Part
does
of the
that doesn't mean that you need to feel rejected if you only have one client, or if you only have this or that. It just means you're on a pathway to continuing to evolve for yourself, and you're probably taking a lot of risks that, quite frankly, many people aren't willing to take.
right. The only risk, I mean, for us, I feel like the only risk I'm taking is putting myself out there. There's no monetary risk involved at this point. There's strictly we are doing what we're feeling led by God to do and put out into the universe for other people to hopefully benefit from. And if there at some point is monetary gain from that, that's fantastic. But if it's only because God is using this to enrich Justine and I and how we relate to each other, to ourselves, and to the world around us, that's good enough. I mean, that was the intention. What's that?
I said, then it's worth it. And that's
Then it's
yeah, then that's the perspective, right? And that's how we can start to look at everything in our lives as a blessing.
right.
And what do we see as a blessing in it? What's the lesson? What is God trying to teach me? So anyways, yeah, I think we could talk about this topic all day, every day if we wanted to, but
I like this video thing. It was nice.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
maybe we switch to always zooming our podcast. So
I think it's smart. Yeah.
well, listen.
Maybe we should upload this to YouTube, maybe.
Ooh, maybe. Well, I do know one place we're going to upload it. We have an offer. So this is episode 37 if you're listening to the podcast right now. But if you're tuning into this, in our offer, this is actually just part of a couple items that we wanted to share. We have a short ebook. It's about, I don't know, how long would you say it takes to read it? About 40 minutes or so?
40 pages?
It's about 35
yeah.
pages, but it takes about 40 minutes or so to read. Very digestible, but it's on intuition and kind of just talks to you a little bit through some stories in our process. But how do you really use intuition as a cornerstone to your success? And that could be however you define success in your life. Could have to do with a business, could have to do with your personal life.
It could have to do with going to the grocery store and finding toilet paper.
Yeah, that's a success these days. Or doing a little laundry or washing dishes. But when you have some time, we have seen a lot more people sharing that they are finding time to read books right now. So we thought we'd put out something pretty easily digestible. It's only about 35 to 40 pages, but we hope that you enjoy that resource. And I know Kara's also including just kind of a guided prayer. And that's for, again, we're not pushing that on you and saying you have to pray this way. That's if you're somebody who is questioning and listening and saying, I just need some guidance for where to start. I'm big on guided prayers and also guided meditations and being able to repeat something and read it out loud. I do it with passages in the Bible. Like, it's a great process because then you're proclaiming it out loud and speaking it as truth to yourself. And there's something really powerful about the spoken word and claiming those things as truth. So we're also including that. Feel free to make it your phone wallpaper, whatever floats your boat. Definitely don't have to use it in any particular way. I mean, you could wallpaper your bathroom with it, but but we wouldn't want you to waste all that paper. Okay.
So what are we calling this episode? Let's let the listeners see how we process our titles.
Well, that would be great. Well, let's see. We talked a lot about how do you know the difference between, just your own kind of ego-driven voice versus God's voice. We talked about intuition. This is truly our creative process, listeners and viewers. I don't know. You asked the question. What are you thinking? I feel like you have something in mind, and that's why you asked.
I don't. I'm just. How about?
Have you heard of that book? Have you heard of that book, Dear God, It's Me, Margaret? Like,
No.
when you look up, like one of my coworkers and I, he and I always used to go, "Hello, God, is that you?"
So are you suggesting we should call it?
If it was a really bad day, we'd be like, "No, it's not." Sorry.
Okay, well,
Hearing
maybe
God's
we should
voice.
take. No, it has to be, a little enticing, a little juicy, a little bit. Uh,
Well, what would make you drawn to listening to this type of content?
funny stuff always gets me. So I'm trying to
This
like
isn't
think
a
of
funny
something.
episode.
I
This is
know.
not a funny video.
I'm not saying,
We're
but
teaching about
I'm
real things and practices in our life that have presented the women you see before you today. The hot, not hot messes, the hot that you see. Just the hotness. We're not hot messes. We're just hotness.
Yeah. Mind, body, and spirit. Hot.
Connecting with God.
How to be hot.
Connecting with divine. Connecting with the divine.
My hot intuition. You're frozen.
I'm frozen?
You're not anymore. It might be my internet.
I'm pretty sure it's your internet out in the country.
Okay. Okay, well, I guess you guys will see what we're going to call it, but it will be juicy and hot and funny.
I'm probably going to edit this part out.
No. Okay, no edits allowed.
We'll leave it for outtake. Even though there's not outtakes, it's just all one video. What you see is what you get. We don't hold back.
Don't edit it.
I won't.
All right.
Okay.